In the previous episode, we learned how to configure basic material properties. And we developed a material with metal-like properties. Now we need to add the first texture layer, which is this collection of spots. We won't use an image to add these elements. Instead, we'll use the procedural generation method. As a result, we will not load a texture to apply. We'll look at how to make these spots using Blender nodes directly. The idea is to use a node that generates a random distribution of noise. This is a noise texture. We need this map to add variability to the material. There are two ways to add a node. We can either open the Add menu and then select the node type. Alternately, we can press the Shift and a key combination. This gives us direct access to the node set. And here we have a variety of node categories. So we can add textures, change colors, and do a variety of other things. For the time being, we must add texture. Here we can see all of the textures that can be added. Noise texture is one of them, and it's exactly what we need. So let's click and place it here. This noise texture will have to take the place of the original color. This is due to the fact that we want a base color that is not as uniform as before, but instead has the same variability as the reference material. So I'm going to select the noise texture and connect the output of the color with the base color of the shader. So we got exactly what we wanted. A random distribution of noise. Before I continue, I want to draw attention to a shortcut that will be very helpful quite often. We can see the node itself in the material view if we click on a node while pressing the Control or Command key while also holding down the Shift key. It shows a preview of this node. This is extremely useful in order to see what a single node is doing. To use this shortcut, you must have the Node Wrangler add-on activated, which should be included with Blender since version 3.0. This is just one of the many options available. If it isn't already active, go to Edit, Preferences in the Add-on section, and search for Node Wrangler. When you activate it, it will also appear in the right panel. So, if you click on this arrow, you'll notice that among all the different elements, we also have the Node Wrangler, which allows you to manage nodes much more efficiently. It provides access to many functions, though we will not see them in this case. However, they can be extremely useful for a variety of purposes. To return to see the final material, I'm going to click with Control or Command on a Mac and then Shift. The principled shader is now connected to the material output. It is critical to be able to directly see the preview of a single node so that all other final components, such as reflections, color, and so on, are not displayed. Instead, I'm only seeing this one node, which is the texture with the noise in this case. As a result, we must modify the properties of this node in order to achieve a noise distribution similar to the reference image. Scale and detail are two of the properties. We can enlarge or reduce the spots by adjusting the scale. With the detail parameter, we can act on the noise definition. Reducing the detail lowers the definition and thus the edges appear blurrier. Increasing the detail also increases the definition. We have to match the detail to what we have in the reference material. Then there's roughness, which helps us better define the noise texture. And once again, I'm going to choose a factor so that the result becomes increasingly similar to the reference material. Let's activate the principled shader again. We get a colored noise. But we need a black and white texture as a starting point, so we can then add the coloring we want. We have a colored texture because I linked the color output of the noise texture. If I use the fact node, which represents only the grayscale, we get a black and white image. And here we start to get a better result. Perfect, but this is the first step. The next step is to color this texture with a color similar to the reference image. And as you can see, the color ranges from a petrol green tint to a brown tint. In order to color a grayscale map, we can use the color ramp node. The color ramp is a node that is used very often. It is one of the most frequently used nodes in Blender. So, let's add this node, which is in the converter category. The color ramp has to act on the noise texture. So, I'm going to connect the output of the texture to the input of the color ramp. In this way, the texture is processed by the color ramp. Let's see what exactly this node does. As you can see, it is a gradient from black to white. This gradient is applied to the previous node, changing the colors based on this gradation. We can then remap the point of black and white and the intermediate tones. In addition, we can change the distribution of tones, just as we do with the levels filter in Photoshop. We can then increase the contrast in this way. Again, to see the result better, I have to show the preview of the color ramp in the final material. Now we have to change the colors of the color ramp. I'm going to click on the black color and then on the color picker in the bottom of the color. Click again, and with the color picker, let's select the darkest color that I'm interested in. For example, this one you see here. As the dark colors do not show well, I'm going to choose brighter color as an example. You can then see how the colors are distributed along the gray scale, replacing the original tones. Now, I'm going to select the darkest color, for example this one. Then, we'll select the lightest one. Now we have to add various intermediate colors to create as much as possible a variability of spots, like the one we see here. To add intermediate colors, click on the plus button and another color is added. We then continue in the same way as before. And we can do something like this. I also want to select lighter colors to add some contrast. By doing this, we create a gradient of colors similar to the reference image. We can add one more. And once again, until we get the result we want. Of course, we are not attempting to replicate the reference material exactly. We use these spots as a guideline to define the color distribution. It is now a matter of refining what we have done, modifying the intermediate color spots, and possibly adding more colors. We have two options for defining our material. On the one hand, we can alter the position of the colors. As a result, the distribution of the spots changes. For example, I want to create more intense stains, such as these. Simply move the color selectors to accomplish this. Of course, we can also change the colors themselves. And this is the first way to create the color map. The other option is to return to the noise texture node and tweak the various parameters such as scale, detail, and roughness. Then, by modifying the noise texture and the color ramp, we finally get the desired base material. By reactivating the principled shader display, we can see this. The overall roughness will then be the other critical parameter to act on. And, as previously stated, this allows us to transition from a more specular to a more opaque material. We need a low reflective material in our case, so we must increase this factor. So far, we've seen how to generate a texture procedurally, in this case the material's base surface. In the next lesson, we will see how to add, through the texture paint, the next first layer, which is the rust one.